Welcome to another episode of the I'm Doing Great podcast. My name is Mike Lerner. I'm one of your hosts. Across from me sitting is Gina.
Hi.
I don't know which name. I've known her for this long. I don't know which last name she likes. If she likes Florio, if she likes Bontempo.
Just as long as it's not hyphenated. I hate hyphenated last names.
So
Bontempo's my married name, so we'll say Bontempo.
Okay, Bontempo.
Yeah.
Guys,
because
this
of the patriarchy.
Is another episode of the I'm Doing Great podcast. And before we start, I just want to tell you, I am wearing the same thing from the last episode. That's because the guest previous was just here. Now we have a new guest. So we've done 2 episodes in the same day. I just put on a hat. So to kind of break that.
That's a lie.
No.
This is a different
I've been
day.
wearing this for a week.
He slept here and you can smell it.
Yeah.
But yes, please check out our locals. doinggreat.locals.com. That's where we're going to post a whole bunch of content for you guys to look at and to interact with that you can't get anywhere else. Go over there, sign up. If you want free stuff, you can get free stuff, but it's not, it's not the best stuff. The paid stuff is the good stuff. $10 a month,
stuff.
2 coffees. Don't be cheap. Okay.
Is that 2 coffees now?
Depending on what the coffee is, if you're getting a latte for sure.
I never buy coffees anymore.
Yeah,
so
2
I don't know.
lattes. And
I feel like with inflation, it's
I was
even
actually
more.
just going to say something about
can't
inflation.
interact with the host yet because we haven't introduced him yet, Gina.
Oh, okay.
This is your fault.
Oh, is
so
it?
while he's talking, I'm not cutting to him.
Oh, you're not?
You're just hearing his voice.
Oh.
Yeah, that's how we've done it. So thank you for ruining.
So do
the
I get
past
to introduce him
24
now?
Yeah, now you need to do that.
Okay. Well, I mean, this is such a short introduction. This is the future congressman of my district here in Tennessee.
What number district?
What is TN-5?
Yes.
Yes,
Nice.
I
You
knew
got
that. I knew that, which we just found out that we can actually vote in.
Yes.
I don't know if you're in the district.
Do you have a yard sign yet?
Not yet, but I passed by my neighbor. I almost sent you the photo. Can I get a yard sign?
Absolutely.
Hold on,
Yeah.
We
David.
deliver them for free.
Really?
What a terrible, terrible
I
friend.
know, I'm not-
You don't
Say
have
his
my
name
phone.
so I can cut to his face.
Oh my gosh, I haven't said his name yet. Robby Starbuck.
Good. Now the camera can go on.
Oh, now it's finally on
Yeah.
him. Thanks for coming in. I know you're busy, and I know you probably do tons of interviews, and you're probably sick of talking your head off, but we'll try to keep it light today.
No, it's a lot more fun when it's with friends, That's
Yeah.
why I was just on Jen Ellis's show, and she's been a great supporter and stuff. So she's like, what I find with friends is they'll go places that normal interviews won't go, and they'll be a little more fun,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. We'll keep it. What are you doing with the green screen?
I'm just seeing if that over there.
We're all feeling Mike and I are feeling a little bit funny today because this is our second episode in a row. So I think we're feeling a little bit wacky. So Mike is not so familiar with you, Robby. I know we're friends and we've hung out, and Landon was just on the show about an hour ago. But tell everybody how your race is going so far, how your campaign is going.
Well, I think, it's interesting because some congressional races every cycle turn into national races, and ours kind of has, where it's been nationalized and covered by, all the big media outlets and everything. And there's been some drama in the race and everything, which is, was very interesting to a lot of people. But what's interesting about the drama is the drama was between, the candidate Trump endorsed that a lot of people did not like. And then they felt that he should have, gone with me. But, in terms of all of that, it's almost moot at this point because that person is polling so poorly and has not had the best reception here.
Did he ever retract that endorsement or no?
He didn't retract it, no,
Okay.
but he hasn't seemed to go and
Why would you retract it?
go
Well,
for it.
because they were talking about it was being talked of.
But that's
because
good.
everyone was so mad about retracting the endorsement.
Oh.
Everyone was so mad that he endorsed
Well, it's
her.
the only time this has ever happened, where everybody, Candace Owens came out, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Madison Cawthorn. It was a long list. His own lawyers, people from all over the sort of MAGA universe, people who really supported President Trump and had always had his back, spoke up and said, no, this is
Mike,
not the
we're
right
not
person.
talking about Trump endorsing Robby. He endorsed somebody else.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay.
But Robby, you're saying that all these other people came to this other person's event and endorsed them as well?
No. They all were upset that Trump endorsed this woman. They supported
Yeah.
Robby.
Oh,
they came
gotcha.
out and they said this is wrong. You're endorsing the wrong person. So
Oh, really?
yeah, so it actually ended up being a really good thing for you at the end of the day.
It was so weird because normally when President Trump endorses somebody, they get glowing coverage on our own side. And then also even locally, it'll get announced, on local news and stuff like President Trump got involved in the race. And it's generally by generally I say 99.999, and it used to be 100% of the time. This was the 0.01% of the time where that was not the reception. Every story about it was filled with, but the entire base is angry about it and does not agree.
Well, who's this lady?
And so she worked for Pompeo. Her name's Ortegas, Morgan Ortegas. And before that, she worked for the Obama administration. Her husband worked for the Obama administration. She also, there's a litany of things we could go into, but we'll just put it this way. Not exactly what I would call a conservative. That's just, keeping it very nice. I like to be nice because honestly, at this point, it's like, we're running on something aspirational about what we want for the district, what we want for our country. And so I don't think it's even necessary to go after, the past there and the history there. The only thing I'll touch on is the Atlantic Council because it particularly bothers me. The Atlantic Council is funded by George Soros. So I don't think we should be electing anybody who has been a senior advisor for the Atlantic Council. I just think that's a bad idea, especially on the Republican side.
Yeah.
I think we can do a lot better than that.
What is the Atlantic Council?
It's essentially a Center for Globalism is the best way I could put it. And they're the same foreign policy people from, I'd say, best way to describe it is the Uniparty, who have allowed our country to betray itself and sell ourselves out to China and to become, sort of a nation built on profiting from war, and I think that our side of, sort of America First Republicans, we're done with this forever war ideology.
Yeah.
We don't want to send our kids to die in some foreign country and spend trillions of dollars to take a country from being in the control of the Taliban to 20 years later back into the control of the Taliban. What did we accomplish for those trillions of dollars? Nothing. We didn't moderate the Taliban. We didn't do anything of any real value. And in return, we killed thousands and thousands and thousands of our own people. Why? And so she sort of comes from that world, and it's sort of the Bush uniparty-esque sort of side where it's really built off of how can you profit and gain power. And it's not even so much that they have a political ideology, because they almost don't. It's more so what keeps you in that group of powerful elitists. And they sort of align themselves however they have to stay within that group. And that's just how I see it, But, in general, we've been very blessed to have been right about the reception that would receive in Tennessee 5. And I think people have seen, people see through a lot more stuff than the elitists in DC give them credit for. I feel like the people in DC think America's stupid. They're not here. Our people are not stupid. They see through what's going on, and they want people who are going to fight for them. They're sick of being betrayed at every turn by politicians. And I think that's sort of a microcosm of what we're going to see throughout this whole election cycle, not just in my races, people looking at candidates and saying, what is the definition of insanity? It's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. That's what we've been doing for elections for decades.
Yeah.
Electing the same people with the same backgrounds, telling some different version of the same lie that they then betray us with, because they'll promise us something and they never deliver. They never even try. And that's the part that bothers me the most. It's okay if you fail while trying, but they don't even try. They just tell these pretty little lies and then turn around and stab you in the back. And so I think people are going to be asking, who are the outsiders? Who are the people who don't fit that mold, where this isn't just another, step on the ladder to climb up for power and wealth? And so I think that's what we're going to see in this race, is people make that decision and say, we're going to go with the outsider. And it's telling that, I guarantee right now, foreshadowing, okay? The thing that they're going to attack me on is not policy. It's not experience, none of those things. They're going to attack me for making music videos for celebrities. And they're going to say, these are not conservative values or Tennessee values.
That's what I was going to bring up.
For videos that I made when I was like 18 or 19 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. It's telling that that's the only thing that they're going to be able to do. And I think it's kind of funny. And I think your average person's going to look at that and they're going to say they're doing the same thing to him that they did to President Trump, which is go after things that have nothing to do with the platform and go after his involvement in entertainment. And to be perfectly honest, long term, Trump's involvement in the world of entertainment and mine gives us a bird's eye view into something most people will never see. And it gives us an understanding of the weaknesses of our enemies and how you can use those weaknesses to not just expose them, but to crush them and to win. And so I think that it's something that in a weird way is a strength, even if I would take away, even if I would go back and say, I wish I didn't do that video or that video or that video. it is in the end something that gave me strength and understanding and only solidified my faith in the end, in many different aspects of life, because it gave me an understanding of what was truly going on in that world.
I know, Mike, you have questions about that.
Yeah, well, is Davidson County part of District 5 or no?
Part of it, yes.
Okay,
yeah,
okay,
South
so
Davidson and part of East Davidson.
When's that election? Is this November?
Well, the important part is actually August. So
Okay.
August 4th, early voting is July 15th through 30th, because basically it's such a Republican district in the new district, and it's an open seat that whoever wins the primary is likely going to have a very easy general election.
So it's an open seat, so it's not occupied.
I'm not
by
fighting somebody who's already in the seat. Yeah.
Oh,
he
interesting.
retired. The Democrat who was in the seat retired because it got redistricted this year.
Okay.
So it went from being a Democrat seat for over 130 something years to being now a plus like 15-point Republican advantage.
Okay.
So in a general election, you'd probably have to kill somebody, and even then it kind of depends on who you killed to lose.
Right.
But in the primary, that's really where the race is figuring out, who is it that the people of Tennessee want to represent them, and that primary will probably be a good dictator of who's going to win in the end.
Oh, interesting.
I've never been into local politics, which is not good. That's not something I'm proud of, and I've never really been interested in voting for a local congressman. But I got to say, I was really excited to see you come on the scene. And I think we sort of became friends, like as you had already announced your run, I think, right?
I think maybe a little bit, like we knew each other before, but we became more like friends after.
Right, yeah, because I do remember you announcing on Twitter. So tell everybody how you went from Hollywood director, directing all these A-list stars and seeing really what goes on in Hollywood, to running for Congress. What happened in between there?
For me, it was not even like this immediate conscious choice. It started with, it got to a point in this country where, and this kind of goes even further back. My background is my family fled communism in Cuba, and they lost everything to leftism. So that was always at the core of my being, is never forgetting that, never forgetting how lucky I am to be born American, never forgetting how lucky I am to have the opportunity that I have here and being able to make something out of my life. So even though I didn't have that Hollywood upbringing or money or any of those things, to be able to make it in an industry like that at such a young age, because I made it before I was even 18, where I was directing like big artists. And to do that felt like a giant accomplishment at that age with the upbringing I had and everything. And, being there and in that industry, at a young age, you definitely get sort of pushed in directions that maybe if you had already been an established, older person, you already had kids or you're married or whatever, you would maybe make different choices. But beyond that, it got to a point in our country where in President Obama's second term, I saw all the indicators I had been warned about by my grandparents and my mom about Marxism and what it can do to a country and how quickly a country can be betrayed by its own government and essentially steal the rights of the people. And it was around that time where, I had a conversation with my wife where I was like, Landon, I feel like I need to speak up about politics. I know that it's not something that, conservatives in Hollywood ever do, but I feel like I need to. And, whatever comes with that comes with it. But I feel this need to do it. And it was bigger than myself. It was like I actually kept having this recurring dream of my great grandpa, and it was this conversation he had with me. His name was Bayo, and he would tell me in the dream, and it was this was replaying something that did happen in real life. Him telling me about why Cuba fell. And one of the key things was him telling me essentially that people who should have stood up didn't stand up. It was just, they were afraid of losing business or having people be mad at them or family members angry at them or whatever it was. And that all these little things they were worried about, they ended up on the receiving end of, but 10 times worse in the end because they didn't stand up. Most of them lost everything that they loved, and this just kept happening, and I knew I had to stand up and say something. And that was sort of the beginning of the journey, because that's when I endorsed President Trump. I looked at the field of primary candidates on the Republican side headed into 2016, and I said, he's what we need. We need somebody who's so disruptive to the system that it's going to shake it to its core, that it's going to essentially lay everything bare, in terms of what the real priorities are in DC and how divorced it is from the American people and from our rights and from what our founders intended. And, and I just from that point refused to shut my mouth. And it's amazing how many people in Hollywood tried to get me to reverse course. So many people were like, it's not too late. You can go back on this. Maybe you didn't know this about Trump, or maybe you didn't know that, or maybe you didn't know, and their whole argument was, especially because I was Latino, they thought it'd be effective to be like, he hates Latino people. He's super racist. And I'd be like, okay, number one, where did you get that information?
Well, he thinks you're all rapists, remember?
And that's what they would always say. Say, they think you're all rapists. And I'd say, I listened to every single word he said. Every single word he said. He did not say he thinks all of us are rapists. He said that rapists do come across the border.
Which they do.
That is true. That is verifiably, undisputably true. And go ask an American rape victim who's been raped by an illegal immigrant how they feel about it. Because they don't blame me for being Latino. They blame the fact that we had an open border that allowed that criminal to come into our country and allowed them to carry out their criminal sort of sickness on them and to prey upon American citizens. That's something our government allowed. And so it was weird because like they'd start with this premise that, oh, he's racist. But really in the end, you're the racist one. You're the one who can't make a distinction between an individual person or a group of criminals and a whole racial group, or background. And so it's kind of silly in the end, they'd always be like, well, I never thought about it that way. I can't tell you how many times I heard, I never thought about it that way. Every time they'd bring something up, there's a mass shooting. I'd have some, moron on the set come up to me and be like, I know you're very pro-gun, but like, we've got to do something about these guns. I mean, we can't keep having these mass shootings. And it was always the same conversation. I'm like, what state did it happen in? Like, happened in California? I'm like, okay, happened in California. Do you know what our gun laws are? I do, because I can't buy certain guns I want to buy because of our gun laws. So go ahead and tell me, what are our gun laws in California? First of all, they have no clue. So I tell them what our gun laws were in California. And I remember this because we were shooting something in California when this happened. And, we go through the whole thing and I'm like, so the person actually used an illegal gun. So what makes you think that passing more gun laws is going to make that person who is willing to already break gun laws no longer break gun laws and say, you know what, I actually don't want to go kill all these people? That's not going to happen. A gun law is not going to stop them from doing that. And we've seen credible evidence of that all over the country. And so the reality is, many of them have no clue how many guns are in the country too. So I would tell them, I'd say, how many guns do you think are in circulation in the United States? And, I'll say, let's go with the lowest estimate there is, which is over 300 million. Okay. You don't put that genie back in the bottle. Okay. If you tried to go and confiscate people's guns, there's going to be civil war, period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So there's no other country, because they always say, oh, well, look at Australia.
They love that example.
Yeah, Australia never had 300 million guns in circulation, ever. Yeah. Okay, not even close. Not even per capita, nothing close. Okay, so you can never put that genie back in the bottle. So what Australia did doesn't work. It's kind of like socialists saying that our country should be like Norway, and they have no idea that Norway, number one, is not socialist, but number two, their entire economy is predicated off of having the largest sovereign wealth fund in the world, which is entirely predicated on their investment in fossil fuels.
Yes,
exactly.
Okay?
Which those leftists then hate and say we shouldn't have. So my answer to them is, okay, you know what? I'll make you a deal. Find us a planet somewhere in outer space that is in the formation of an advanced society, okay? And they're at the beginning stages of using fossil fuels, and then will allow us to go and invest in their fossil fuel companies for the entire planet. And that is what it would take over the course of 20 years to build a wealth fund equivalent to Norway's that would be able to fund the social programs you want in the United States. So go knock yourself out, go get a telescope and find us that planet, and we'll get to work, okay? But until then, there's not some country in the world that is going to be able to provide us that same access to capital investment where we're going to be able to create the sovereign wealth fund needed to be able to fund those programs you want. So in many of those cases, again, it's always the same thing. Like, well, I never thought about it that way. Well, that's because you never thought about it. You just went and listened to whatever the media told you.
So were you always conservative? Did you grow up conservative? Okay.
Yeah, I was always conservative. I think there's always that thing where you're like, when you're a teenager or you're like a young adult, there's things you don't think about. And I think that's probably the only thing divorced from conservatism. So like, say, there was a video that was like just like a little on the raunchier side with a rapper where like girls are, nothing crazy is happening, but like they're in bikinis and stuff. And it's just kind of not, it doesn't align with my values now. Like, and my kids would never watch stuff like that. But like, when you're a teenager and that stuff's up, you don't think about that from a lens of politics. And that's something I think comes later. And also in the society we're living in now, everything has become hyper aware in terms of how it's politically oriented. So that's probably the only thing in my entire upbringing where like I just didn't think about its alignment to politics, and how it would affect generations in the future. Because, one of the things that was always sold to me with music and music videos and stuff like that was that, there's certain groups that you're sort of targeting with it. So like, in none of those cases where you're directing something for a rapper am I thinking, oh, we're targeting little kids. But then now we see artists like Lil Nas out there Thankfully, I never worked with. But Lil Nas, you know, you look at the reality with him, he did that song Old Town Road. And this is sort of how it works now, is that he had that song, biggest song in the world. You know, kids go and subscribe to his YouTube. He becomes the most subscribed YouTube channel for minors in music, in rap. Okay.
And he was like reading children's books to kids.
Reading
and
children's
stuff like
books,
that.
doing a children's tour. He went to public schools and did a children's tour. And then what is his next release? His next release is the raunchiest of raunchy things you could do.
Where he's giving Satan a lap dance.
Yeah, him simulating sex with Satan. And, you know, it goes into a territory where then it was so graphic, and this is what people don't think about. An alert was sent for that video to every single one of those minors who subscribes to him. And the reality is, I want you to think about it this way. If somebody down the street here, some old dude, okay, some old sick pervert, made a video at home simulating him having sex with Satan, and he text messaged it to a bunch of kids that go to one of the high schools here, or the middle schools here, or elementary schools here, what would happen to him?
Yeah, he would be in jail.
He'd be in jail,
yeah.
and he should be.
Yeah.
Lil Nas did that same thing, but he sent it to probably close to 1 billion people, 100+ million of which are minors.
And his career blew up.
And so I went on Candace shortly after that video came out. And when I did, I said, I'm going to lay this out there. I know their record label, and I know how they operate. I know that they did this. Okay. Their analytics will make it very clear. So I'm telling you, they sent this video intentionally to minors. They knew what they were doing. And if they didn't, they should sue me for it, because I'm telling them. And I went into the way their algorithms and the analytics work for the back end, because that is actually what woke me up towards the end of my career, was seeing the analytics on this stuff and seeing how they were targeting minors. And that's what made me go, this whole industry is so nakedly corrupt when you actually look under the cover and you see what they're doing. They're trying to program a society and a generation in the future to hold all these crazy views, you know, because it's not just the music or the lyrics. It's the fact that we've created this celebrity culture that is so strong that kids grow up and essentially model their lives after these people. So whatever they're then trained to say, and they're trained to say it, these people, let me tell you, most of them are dumb as a bag of rocks, okay? I'm just being honest, they are, okay? And when an issue crops up in society, and there's like this big issue, whether it's like, you know, there was a shooting or, you know, there's a big climate change protest or whatever, they don't just naturally think to themselves, oh, I would like to go take a position on this. Their PR person tells them and crafts a statement for them and tells them what they believe. And that is what everybody else says. So sure, that's what they're going to do. They have no actual political ideology, you know, and they're so sort of moldable. And this is the other thing I found in Hollywood. The people who become stars are not the most talented. They're not the most capable in any way. They're the most moldable every single time. Labels will sign people who are incredibly talented. And the minute they find out that they're not moldable, they get rid of them.
Right.
Studios do the same thing with actors. If it feels like that person is going to step out of line at some point from what you want them to be, which is controllable, then they get rid of them, you know? And so that's what it is there.
So did you meet many or any celebrities when you were working in Hollywood that were secretly conservative?
Yes, a lot. Some of the biggest stars in the world, actually.
Right, yeah.
But I define them as conservative cowards because here's the reality. In some of these cases, some of the conservatives in Hollywood are the biggest stars in the world. These are people with over $100 million in the bank, okay? And they have no reason not to come out and be honest about who they are. And their excuse for not doing it is that it'll destroy their career and that it'll drag their family through the mud and blah, 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 blah. Okay. I've always told them, what world do you want your kids to grow up in? Do you want them to grow up in a world where they can have your values, or where having your values is illegal? Because we're trending towards that world where a social credit system will be in place where your kids will not have the right to even vocalize any view even close to yours, but you're afraid to go out there and do it when you know your family and the next generation, the one after that, is set for life off your career. And if your concern is, oh, I'm not going to be able to work anymore, then you're just not using your brain, because the minute you have an A-list, like huge actor come out and say, I'm a Republican. Yes, they'll get crushed by the studio system. But you know what else will happen? People on our own side will flock to their defense and their support.
And our people are more loyal.
And we will self-fund their movies.
Yeah.
We would crowdfund 40, 50, 80 million dollars if we had to for one of these stars to be able to make a movie that is in alignment with our values. You already see that in, sort of the popularity of a lot of the content being created now. And so I think actually in a weird way, the only thing missing from this culture that we're building on our side is one of those big people to come out, because that's what it's going to take to get one of our conservative billionaires on the right to go, okay, you know what? I see the value in throwing down $300 million into a movie studio and creating our own. And I guarantee you that will happen. And when it does, it will become the most successful movie studio in our country.
It's just crazy to me because, I mean, I know we've talked about some names, obviously, in behind closed doors. And I know people like Candace, who, when I worked for her, there were plenty of A-list people that would reach out. I mean, Mike even knows some people too. It's like, at this point, what do they really have to lose? Because they're more than financially stable. Yep. And it's like, I honestly think at this point too, when you come out and you identify as conservative and you're really honest about your beliefs, the net of that is good. You're going to lose the studio. You're going to lose some of the Hollywood support. You might lose some of your followers. But I think in the end, we are actually the majority. And so you end up having the majority of the people supporting you in your work. So I still can't wrap my head around.
Passionately supporting you. Like, look at the Aldeans. Okay. The Aldeans were pretty quiet previous, I didn't really know much about their politics or anything like that. I think they kind of kept it to themselves for a long time. And when they came out over the past 16 months and got super vocal about politics and about, Biden and Trump and all that stuff, I mean, they've never had more rabid support.
Right.
He sells out everywhere. She's selling out of everything she puts out. Totally. His wife, Brittany. Yeah. Like, they're more popular than they've ever been. And so I think they need to kind of look at the proof of concept here that doing it is not something you need to be afraid of. It's something you need to embrace, because as you get more of them, it's going to suddenly become a cascade, because the safer it is, the more people are going to go take that trail, and I think that's sort of where we're at, is that there's a lot of people who are trailblazers in a way, of just making a path there so that it's easier for people in the future. And I do think that's critical. It's critical to not just the survival of our value systems and our culture, but really our country. And that seems dramatic, but it's not, because you can't have a country if you don't have a culture. And that's been one of the things that our side has missed for a long time. And we've had a lot of these sort of washed up rhinos in office who don't understand culture at all. Yeah. And so one of the consequences of that is we handed it to the left entirely. And so I think that's what we're going to see become a priority in the future for us, is that we do have to have our own defined culture that is very clear, that's not wishy-washy, that the Democrats can't define because people can look at it themselves and see exactly what it is. That's what's going to give us that ability to differentiate. Because the truth is, if you're a teenager right now, or you're a college student, and you engage in culture all the time, if there's not an alternative, what do you expect them to go do? Yeah. And on the flip side of that, like, if you don't make an argument to the things that those kids are faced with every day, like student loans, and you don't spell out for them and explain how the student loan crisis was caused by government intervention in the first place, and you just allow the left to totally corner that market and say, oh, it should just be free. I mean, it's like they're running for class president. They're like, everybody's going to get free candy, but if there's nobody on the other side talking sense in any sort of, way, what do you expect to happen? They're going to embrace these ideas. And so we've got to go into the battlefield and give people culture to engage with and arguments to engage with. If we don't give them that, we can't act surprised when they go turn to the left.
So what are you running on? What are your policies? What are you promising?
So I'd say number one for me is the border crisis, because that's something, and a lot of people are like, who don't live here are kind of surprised by that, because they're like, Tennessee's not near the border. Why does that matter? It's actually the top issue that our voters care about when they're polled. Wow. And it's not even close. There's not a second, there's not a third that's even close. It's wildly the number one concern. Okay. And so I've been down to the border. My wife and I, we actually did the March to the Border, which was the largest coalition march to the border that's happened in our lifetimes. And essentially what we found down there, and I already knew a lot of this, but it was put putting a face to it and putting, border agents to it and their stories and actual migrant stories who were trafficked across the border, who didn't want to come here, but were trafficked by the cartels, to be able to sit down and talk with all these people, it gives you even more moral clarity about the problems at the border. And so one of the things I think I can bring a lot to Congress with is the fact that I am Latino. And I think that we need that voice on the Republican side that is able to battle all the racist claims the Democrats make and to be able to throw that back at them and be like, look, I am Latino. So are you claiming I just want to go and throw Latinos into detention centers or deport them just because they're Latino? It's ludicrous. But the problem is we haven't engaged them on their number one argument, which is that we're racist. And we need to weaponize that against them. And that's one of the things I can do, is be able to credibly speak to the Latino community and be able to message across the country on, I think especially to the suburban people who have bought into this idea that not protecting your country is something you have to do because you're racist if you do protect it. We have to speak to them with voices that counteract the Democrat arguments. So it's a lot more credible to a suburban mom who bought all the BS from CNN during 2017, 2018 about the border, for me to go to them as a Latino and tell them why we need border security and why we need to shut things down, versus sending somebody like, Kevin McCarthy to them. Kevin McCarthy is the person the Democrats frame everything under the context of, so me being able to go to them, I think is a very different argument I can make. And it's actually, what's funny is I'm harder on immigration by a long shot than Kevin McCarthy is, but we will receive two totally different receptions from those people in terms of how we explain the problem and how we battle the Democrat sort of argument against it. Outside of that, school choice is very important to me because I think it's the bedrock of a lot of problems in our country. Because, the greatest predictors of success in children is education level and your engagement with parents. Like, is your parent at home? Is your parent in your life? How much time do you spend with them? Things along those lines. Those are the greatest predictors. And so a couple things are going to happen as a product of school choice. Number one, I believe in a very specific kind of school choice, and it's no strings attached, which means that the government should have absolutely no place in what you teach your kids or standardized testing or any of that stuff. Since the introduction of standardized testing, education scores in America across the board have gone down. Since the introduction of a federal Department of Education, test scores have gone down across the entire board. Every single grade level has gone down. So our standards have dropped in every way, and it's been ever since the government got involved. It's kind of like student loans. There was no student loan crisis until the government got involved with giving loans for school. And it was because suddenly Jenny, who wanted to go get a $300,000 loan for gender studies, could go do it, and the government would say, yeah, that's a good idea, Jenny. Whereas a bank, if you went into a banker and you said, I want $300,000 to study gender studies, the bank would be like, that's really sweet. Not for us, though. They would just dismiss you because it's a ludicrous idea. You're never going to get that investment back. And so anytime you get the government involved, it's a bad thing. But in the case of these kids, what will happen if you do this, let's take a place like Baltimore. They spend $17,500 per child on public school. And with that, they produce... Per year.
Okay.
1 in 10 who graduate a high school in Baltimore is proficient in math and reading. Okay.
1 in 10?
1 in 10. And so when you look at those numbers, if you say, okay, $17,500 per child, what will happen if we just give that to parents and we say, you choose what school is best for your child? The only rule is they have to go to school, period. It can be homeschool, it can be micro school, it can be religious school, whatever you want, but you have to send them to school. Okay. And I really think that's really the only place government has, is making sure kids do go to get an education in some way. So then parents decide and they say, you know what, I want to homeschool. How many parents are going to decide to homeschool, and how many more moms and dads are going to stay home as a result of having that capital to be able to do it? Now, what is the social consequence of that? More conservative kids, more conservative families, more families who spend time together and have a value system that gets inherited from generation to generation. So you're protecting your values, and you're also going and multiplying your culture in the future. Beyond that, how many then will get sent to religious schools instead of public schools where they can't go and talk about God on a regular basis? Probably another. I mean, if we collectively put those groups together, it's probably close to half of America who would then choose to go to these institutions. It's why the unions are so afraid of the idea of school choice, because the government wants to own our kids, and people like Randy Weingartner, who runs the largest teachers union, they want to control our kids not just in school, but outside of school as well. And so the social systems are trying to teach our kids are essentially what so many parents are running away from now. Like, I don't want my kid to get sent to school and be taught that my son can wake up tomorrow and be my daughter. Okay. I don't want that for my kid. But at some public schools, that's exactly what they're going to be taught. And so we need to provide parents that choice. And I think that when the money follows the child, good things are going to happen. And when you look at things like crime, okay, how is this going to affect crime 15, 20 years down the line when you have a generation of kids who had their parents more present?
That's right. Yeah.
You know, every single aspect of this, economically, what jobs they choose, across the board, we're going to see huge changes.
Even down to their social skills, things like that. Yeah. One thing that is some language that I've been hearing from a lot of teachers is, you know how we were talking about that one teacher who's really mad that he can't tell his kids that he went paddleboarding with his gay lover. These teachers say, my kids a lot. My kids. I can't talk to my kids about this. I'm like, these are not your kids. This is the problem, is that they actually think that these are their children. And
100%.
so they really think that they own your kids and that I mean, you know, yeah, their education is in their hands, but even more than that, they think that they own your kids, like my kids. I can't talk to my kids about this. I saw another video from some weirdo teacher, I don't know, maybe in Florida, who was almost crying. So I can't tell, you know, when my kids ask me if I'm gay, I'm like, they're not your kids. And this kind of language, it actually scares me.
It's Marxism.
I was just going to say it's Marxism because just like we said earlier, what Marxism wants to do is they want to replace God and religion with the state. And they want the state to be the final say, and they want the state to have ownership of the family and also replace the family.
100%.
Yeah.
That's 100% what they want. And these teachers, I mean, they're genuinely, the ones who are doing this stuff, they're genuinely sick individuals that belong nowhere near children.
Yeah.
This is why, you know, again, back to what are your priorities? Nationally, on a federal level, I'm going to introduce a bill exactly like Florida's anti-grooming bill that the Democrats have called the Don't Say Gay bill, which is not at all what it says.
Because the word gay is not even
in the bill. It's not even in the bill. The word gay is not in the bill. But beyond that, I'm going to do that federally. And my only criticism of their bill in Florida is it did not go far enough. Okay. It blocks these teachers from doing this and teaching this crazy sexuality and orientations and pangender, slam gender. I mean, I can't keep up with it. Okay. To teach them this stuff up to third grade. That's not far enough. We need to protect the innocence of kids. And I want to federally make it a law that you can't do this up until sixth grade at the very least. And I think, you know, I would go even further, but I'm thinking, keeping in mind the people we have to get on board to vote for it. And what's interesting about this law, though, is this sort of speaks to how radicalized the leadership in the Democratic Party has become, or at least how dependent they are on the radicals within their party. Because the radicals on the left have control of the Democratic Party, and they will for a long time. And here's why. Even after they lose in this election, I believe they are going to get crushed in the 2022 midterms. They're going to talk on CNN about how they need to moderate policy and blah, blah, blah. But here's the truth. Behind closed doors, they know they can't alienate the far left. They have no ability to win without the far left right now. They have to keep the far left engaged. So how do you do that if you moderate your policy? Because on the flip side of that, if you continue with the far left and all this BS, you're going to alienate a group of people who are sort of center left, who are now seeing the Republican Party in a different light as sort of a sane alternative to this far left Marxist craziness. Because when they went and they polled Florida Democrats on the Don't Say Gay bill, the majority supported the bill. So those people are going to eventually move away from the Democratic Party. And I think you're going to see them at least be not motivated to vote in this election. Right. And so long term, they have a problem on their hands. But these teachers, they should not only be fired if they do this. If they teach this stuff, teachers should not only be fired, but they should never be allowed to work with children again, period. Yeah. These are not their children. Right. And I'm sorry, but when I went to school, I didn't even know my teachers existed out of school walls, okay? I didn't know what they did. I thought they slept there, okay? I was like, I assumed they lived at the school because I knew nothing about their private lives. And guess what? That's how it should be. I should know nothing about their private life. A child should not know who they have sex with. They shouldn't know how many kids. I mean, it's honestly, it's ludicrous. They're there to learn math and reading. They're not there to learn the biography of their teacher's life, okay? They don't need to know who the school approves of in terms of sexual relationships and stuff. I mean, the whole thing's crazy if you think about it. Like, they literally have days in these schools to celebrate what type of sex people have, you know? Like, if you really break it down to the very simple, raw sort of truth of this, if you have a Pride Day at school, at a public school for an elementary school group, okay, and you have kindergartners doing their pride flags and stuff, you're literally teaching them like, hey, these certain sex acts are okay.
Yeah.
That's absolutely bonkers.
It is. Yeah. It's
like,
disgusting.
I don't care if you're straight or gay or what you are.
Yeah.
There's no place for this in kindergarten.
Yeah. No. Especially that young. I mean,
it's nuts.
I would even, I would even go farther and say even past 6th grade, they don't need to hear about it. But as young as kindergarten, I don't even know how people can possibly be okay with that and think that 6-year-olds need to hear about any type of sex.
How can you rationalize it? Honestly, how can somebody on the left rationalize this stuff?
Racism.
Mike's black-pilled.
Yeah. Yeah, which is interesting because I have someone running for Congress sitting next to me. No, I had some questions. I'll get into the Second Amendment stuff after, but when you were talking about border security and being someone who's Latino, the first thing that came to mind is because, are you fully Cuban?
Yeah, so I'm mixed. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm mixed. So I'm part African American. Actually, you would never know that. But and I never talk about that, which is weird. But
You're black.
I only found out recently because one of my sisters did like genealogy test things. So I'm like 60% Spanish, and then like 10% African American.
Okay, so you're not black
like
enough
that.
to say the N-word.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it anyways,
Like
regardless.
12%.
But
12.
that I wouldn't say regardless, but that and then what was the other one? I was Mongolian, East Asian, and some German, some what was it? It's Finnish.
Okay.
I was like a real mix of the
Melting pot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my family's apparently got around the world. They were travelers. But yeah, so a lot of really strange background. I was not expecting that. I thought it would be kind of uniformly Spanish or
Right.
maybe a little bit of European and stuff. But yeah, so big mix.
So Starbuck's not your original last
Starbuck
name.
is a given legal name. It
Right.
is not my family name.
Okay.
So I was born with the name Starbuck, but
Really?
it is not my family name. Yeah, my sisters are Starshine, Starlight, Sunshine, and I got to start from the top. Sunshine, Starshine, Starlight.
Those sound like pronouns.
I know. So
wait-
it's weird because I've had people be like, were your parents hippies or something? No, they were not hippies. In fact, quite the opposite.
Those were their first names?
No, not their first names.
Like
No,
middle
no,
names or
those are
something?
their middle names, but there's a longer backstory there. So like I started going by only Robby Starbuck as a child, and it was just something that stuck. And so that was it. And as an adult, I just stuck with it. That was just what everybody always knew me as.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my Cuban family's last names are Cerati and Quesada,
Okay.
which in retrospect would be, especially Quesada would probably be a hard one in elections. I don't know. if
But
people could
useful
spell that.
though. But useful
maybe useful
to an
I will say
opposing
this,
Democrat.
in our district right now. 10% is Latino in the new district, and that's the
Okay.
most in any Tennessee district.
I was going to say that sounds high for Tennessee.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that's going to work to our advantage a lot because, I'd also be the first Latino ever elected to federal office in the state of Tennessee. And I have to look at this. I imagine I'd be one of the first in the South entirely, in this part of the South, at least. In Florida, very different. Florida has plenty of Latinos. Texas does. But I don't think in some of these other surrounding states here, I don't think there's been very many. So for the Latinos in the district, that will be a motivating factor, although I would argue it shouldn't be because we should be voting on values, not on that stuff. But
Right.
it is just, that's just
Yeah,
reality.
I figured it would be more of like an optic issue, is being like, he's Latino?
Yeah. No, so
So
well, here's the
that's
thing.
what I was curious
We're
about.
gonna do Spanish ads and stuff like that too,
Yeah.
which I think will make that very clear, where they'll be able to see that because in the district, most of the Latino population lives around Antioch area too, so we'll have a lot of Spanish ads there and yard signs and stuff like that too.
Yeah, the problem is they don't like Cubans. That's the in with the Latin community.
They
We all
don't?
hate each other.
Really?
That's the
It's kind of
problem.
like Asians.
So there are a lot
But Cubans
of
are overwhelmingly conservative.
we are the most conservative voting bloc in the country.
Oh.
And so, and I mean, could you imagine why our family, our family's only lost everything to these crazy people on the left? But no, there is some truth to the fact that in the Latino community, there is a lot of sort of infighting, among different groups. But
It's mostly playful, like I'm bringing up. as
exactly.
playful.
I was
Yeah.
going to say it's mostly playful, and then once you bring it out into like the wider context of politics and stuff like that, there is still a sort of what's the right way to put it? Like a tendency to really value identity. I was not born with that. But a lot of Latinos are, where like they really care about that part of it. Like, do you identify with that person on a cultural level?
Yeah.
And I do understand it from a context. Like, if you're looking like, do they understand my life experience? Like, yes, I did have one of my grandmas, take a chancleta and hit me with it, or I did have coffee in my bottle as a kid,
in your bottle?
Yes. So in
Is that a thing?
Cuban culture, they a lot of coffees from the time you're a baby. So I've had coffee since I was a little kid.
Wait, why? Just because?
It's just a cultural thing. Colombians do it too. There's a couple Latino cultures who do it, but it was like a normal thing, And what's funny about it is, what? They were totally onto something though, because, a lot of people treat ADHD with coffee as
caffeine?
A natural thing. Yeah, with caffeine. So here's what's interesting. When they would give it to me as a kid? When I was super hyper.
Really?
Yeah, they'd give me.
Do you give coffee to Coco? Coco doesn't.
And it would just relax me. I had this conversation with Landon.
You can't give Coco coffee. He's youngest.
About a week ago, I had this conversation with Landon that I wanted to try coffee with her.
Let me paint a picture of Coco for you. For Christmas, they got her one of those little trampolines that like the little, and Landon says in the morning when they wake up, they hear Coco downstairs, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Just like jumping on the trampoline in like the early morning by herself.
She's got to get her energy out. She has more energy than any human being I've ever met. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Like you can't give her coffee.
So I want to try it once and just see if maybe the inverse correlation thing happens where like she's so hyper that coffee will calm her down. Because it worked on me when I was a kid.
Wow.
Like, I was not as energetic as her, but I had some energy. And anytime they would give me coffee, I'd just chill out, and I was good.
I have heard that some people who are very hyper, when they drink coffee, it does the opposite effect. It makes them kind of chill.
Yep. So we may try it. Stay tuned and I'll let you know how that works.
Yeah, give me a call. I'll come over. I want to observe.
Scarlett loves coffee though.
Does
and
she?
You know what's funny is that so my oldest daughter's 13. She likes coffee, and there's the people who are like, you're gonna stunt their growth. I'm like, my daughter's already like 5'4".
She's so tall.
I'm 6'2", and coffee didn't do anything to me. I had it my whole life, So
she's taller than
if I hadn't had coffee, I probably, if that is true, I'd probably be like 7 foot tall, and I don't want to be. So I think we're solid on that front. So it's funny, but within those Latino groups, a little bit of like playful infighting and stuff, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of similar experiences around the culture, and so I think that that's something that will become easy to identify with for some of the people in our district.
Yeah.
I wonder if are they polled, if they care or not, if the politician is Latino and talking about border policy at all?
Yes.
Is that, it helps?
They care more about, in the Latino population, they care a lot about if the candidate is Latino.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
That is something that's been pulled quite a bit. In terms of immigration policy, one of the great misunderstandings of Latinos is that like they all want open borders. They don't. A lot of people actually down at the southern border of Texas, a bunch of Latinos are voting for the Republican candidates, not because they're even like strictly conservative, but because they're so sick of the illegal immigration and how it's destroying their cities and their towns, that they're like, we need people in here who are going to shut this down. And so that's really interesting. A place like McAllen's elected Democrat mayors for, as long as I can remember. And they just elected a Republican who's the first Republican Latino they ran as a mayor there. And he won, and it's largely predicated off of his immigration stances.
Wow.
So
how recent was that?
That was probably about a year or so. It was after the presidential election. So it was after a little bit of the craziness that happened. So it was a little less than a year ago.
Has there been any noticeable change as far as
a mayor can only do so much. That's
right.
The problem is border policy really is predicated on what the federal government is willing to do and what the state is willing to do. So that's why I've criticized Abbott in Texas. I feel like he could go a lot further because I'm not if I played governor for a second, and it's a lot easier to armchair quarterback and everything, but if I was playing governor in Texas, like I would have the hardest core enforcement of our border.
Yeah,
and I
Texas.
would dare the federal government to do something about it.
Yeah.
Like go and try to stop me, but I'm assembling my own force of as large as I can. And I mean as large as I can. If it's 1 million people, great. I want to drive the point home to the federal government that we are going to protect our state if you won't. And that's my biggest criticism of him, is I think he's been pretty weak on that. He did win his primary, so hopefully he finds the courage to be a little bit stronger in his next term.
Didn't he just write a letter citing COVID as the as a huge threat? upcoming?
Oh, I
I
didn't
just
see
saw a
that.
letter
Did
from
you?
I
like the
don't know.
governor, like the governor's office with his signature saying that in the foreseeable future that COVID is going to be, I forget the language. If you can find that, Gina, let me know. But
Well, a bunch of these governors are playing language games because they want access to COVID money. That's the other thing. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't know is so there's still a bunch of this COVID money out there from the federal government. And to get it, you have to be in a state of emergency. And so if you cut
that's
your
what that language looked like.
if you kill your emergency order and say this is no longer an emergency, well then say bye-bye to the COVID money. And so this is one of the ways the federal government has sort of tricked states into this state of psychosis where they're pretending that COVID is the end of the world. And if you didn't have that sort of carrot in front of them, how different would things be right now? And I think that's another thing that people need to look at in these upcoming elections is, do you want people who chase carrots or people who have their own offensive plan to make somebody else chase a carrot? Because what we're doing is not working. I think that's plain to see.
What about money in politics as far as lobbying, huge donations from political action committees, from huge unions that we know they contribute millions of dollars to certain politicians? I'd assume that you'd be very open about disclosing who you accept donations
Absolutely.
from.
So
what your average donation is.
Absolutely. So we're super, super, super transparent about this stuff. And there's a number of reasons why. Number one, I refuse all money from corporations. So if a corporation has a PAC that they funnel money through, we don't take money from it. I don't want to owe anybody anything. And we're probably one of the only serious candidacies in the country that actually is doing this. And I think it's because we need to drive a point home about this in elections. I think that it is part of what has made our system so destructive and poisonous because we've essentially elected a bunch of good fundraisers who are not good representatives or good people, and there are some good ones there who have made it through the system and gotten there and are fighting for the right things, but they don't have enough of us. But the thing is, you need proof of concept before a lot of people will adopt something. And so I saw that we were in a unique position because there's not many people who announce they're going to run for Congress who already have a large platform or a large following and an ability to, fundraise small dollar donations and stuff like that. So I said, okay, well, there's one thing. And then we have the other advantage. I did very well. Me and Landon did very well in business and stuff. So we've got a decent bit, put away where we can spend some money in this race too ourselves. And so a combination of small dollar donations and us investing our own money in the race will be able to be enough to compete against these people who are taking these huge corporate PAC donations and stuff like that. So that's step one, is that we just refuse that money altogether. Because the truth is, if you take money from Amazon, you take money from Google, or you take money from any of these places, and the PACs they funnel, you owe them something. And nobody wants to admit that, but that's the truth. They expect you to vote a certain way, and if you don't, they will punish you. And so that's one thing that we're very dedicated to. In terms of, our average donation, I'm actually not 100% sure what it is, but I know it's less than $100.
Okay.
So it's something in like it varies month to month. That's why I don't know what the average is all time, but it's probably in like the $60 to $70 range, something like that. Yeah. So, and that's sort of the thing, is that like, this is real people giving a piece of their paycheck every month. A lot of them are on recurring donations, and it's like, they give $50 a month every month for the whole campaign. And it makes a big difference because, if you think about the real cash differential here in the end, in this race, like to get very in the weeds on it, there's people right now who are polling at 1% or less in the race who are going to spend over $1 million in the race. They're going to spend probably close to $2 million. Okay. And those people who are doing that will probably get close to, if not outspend us. If they go up into and over the 2 million range, they'll outspend us. Whereas we'll poll way beyond them and we'll get way more votes than they do. But the difference is we're effectively and efficiently spending money. We're not wasting money on things. So like they may spend, $80,000 on an ad. We'll spend like my next ad coming out, which when I show you this, you're going to be like, what? We spent less than $1,000 on, and it is way beyond the production value of anything you see from other campaigns.
The first ad you released was really good.
But you have a helpful background.
We spent
too,
$0 on that.
You did?
We spent $0 on that ad. Wow. Yeah. That was just all me using stuff, that I already have and my know-how and stuff like that, and volunteer power. And that's
That was
that's
such
super
a good ad.
beneficial.
Yeah.
And so that's huge for us. Is like we're effectively, and the other thing too, door knockers. Okay.
Yeah.
Other campaigns spend like $15, $20 an hour sending door knockers out. Ours are all volunteers and we have more than they do.
Smart.
So,
Wow.
stuff like that. There's ways you can make up that ground without spending cash. And I think that people are so invested in our campaign shows that people want this proof of concept to work. And it's probably the most dangerous thing I've done is not take the corporate money. Because that's what everybody in DC expects you to do. And it's the number one criticism I get from DC is like, you're not taking enough money from these places. You don't have enough cash, from these places. You've got it.
But what do you need once you're there? What do you need money for?
They need money to continue this whole cycle of what they do.
Okay, so here's and this directly influences my next question is, do you have an exit strategy for, let's suppose you do win? Is there a certain amount of time that you want to be in DC and then you want to say, I have this time allotted that I want to try and get this done, whatever I can, and then I want to get out. I don't want to stay there too long because my fear and what I really am in favor of term limits on people in Congress, pretty much any politician anyway. So my fear is that whoever I elect, they kind of want to stay there forever.
Yes.
And then,
so here's a couple things I can tell you on that. Number one, I hate DC. I think it's gross, smells weird, and I'm not
Food's
there.
bad.
I'm not there to enjoy it. Okay, that's number one.
Right.
I'm there to work for the people here, and so I think you will see me do a lot more in district than DC. Obviously you have to go and vote and all that stuff, but I'm not going there to pal around and do that whole deal. Beyond that, I signed the term limits pledge. So I am only willing. This is less than what they say. They say I think they say the pledge is 6 terms for Congress.
12 years. Is it?
Yeah, something like that. I would be surprised if I go beyond 3 terms. I'd be really surprised by that. I think 3 terms is kind of my max because here's the other thing that I've committed to. So I trade a lot. I've been investing for a long time now. And, that's something that I want to be able to do in the future, but I'm not going to do when I'm in Congress. I've started the process of selling off a lot of my positions already in anticipation of winning because playing for winning, not losing. But beyond that, I've been very transparent about it too. Like I'm going to hold, I'm going to have a list of the things that I'm still holding when I enter office.
Right.
And those are all going to be things that I'm committed to keeping the entire time I'm in office.
Right.
And people knowing exactly what those things are.
If anything happens and you're seeing like buying new stock or something like that, it doesn't set
So
off.
like one of the things, like say Tesla stock, I believe in Tesla as a company long-term, regardless of, as long as they're under Elon's leadership. I just think that, they're innovating on so many different levels that it's something that the company is going to go up in value over time. So I want to hold that for my kids.
Right. Like, does that have anything to do with like emoluments or anything like that? Like, can you, while you're in office, I guess, because I don't necessarily know how like market funds work or anything like that, but you can't put someone else's name in like a custodian or something like that where you withdraw your name from it.
We're actually looking at this right now, like how I can do it effectively, because it's really for my kids. I want them to have it when they're adults one day. So it may, if there's a way to do it, we may transfer it to some sort of trust or something like that where like they can have that. Because I think it's one of those things where like you wish your grandparent had bought like, stock in a company and just stuck it in a box for you or something. And it was like $2 back then and now it's $2,000. One case, I had actually told my mom to buy Amazon and Google stock when they had first come out. I was like, I just think these companies are going to be behemoths. The way they're set up. No.
Did you?
And she's so upset about that to this day.
gosh.
She's like, if I had listened to you back then, I would
even
have
like
like
100
$100
shares of
million
it.
Jeez. But no, so I feel that way about Tesla, and that's why I'm like, I'm going to regret it if I don't do this. So it's,
Well, how long ago did you start investing in Tesla?
pretty early on.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
You have a
early
Tesla,
on.
right?
Yeah, I have.
Can I
one.
test drive it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm
second guess to have a
Here's
Tesla.
what I tell people about the Tesla thing too, and this is what's funny is because people are like, I wouldn't expect you to have an electric car, and here's the thing, I am under no sort of weird delusion that I'm saving the world by driving a Tesla. I just like the car. It's a fast, fast car. It's safe.
It's like a little rocket ship, they say.
It is, and it's so comfy inside and
Is
stuff.
it?
And the maintenance is so easy. They send somebody to your house to fix it. So like if there's something wrong, like my windshield wiper wasn't working. They sent somebody to my house, they fixed it, that's done. Boom. You don't need to leave your
Really?
house. They just pop over, they do it, they're gone.
You don't need oil changes or anything.
You don't need oil changes, all that stuff. So it's very, very I would just say it's been the best experience I've had with a car. And I was really annoyed by their hold music at Tesla. And so I tweeted Elon Musk and I was like, hey, Elon, you got to get rid of this hold music. Like, it's brutal. And number one, he was angry that I was on hold as long as I was, but he reached out to me and he actually got them to make their hold music optional on all Tesla lines.
Really?
Because I tweeted him over the hold music and he was like, yeah, it is annoying.
That's cool.
So
how do you feel about
very responsive company too?
I like that.
But yeah, so I feel like it's one of those things where good things are going to happen there long term. And
Okay.
How do you feel about his now possible board seat at Twitter?
he got it. He got the board seat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to change anything?
I think that it is. And the question is, how far is he willing to go? Because here's the thing, I've seen nobody in media talk about yet, but I think this is the real story here, is that is Elon willing to use his Twitter as a sounding board to bash board members at Twitter? If he is, then change will happen.
Right.
Because the thing they're most afraid of is that if he uses it to do that and to call them out, it's a big deal, because the other thing is, as a board member, he may end up privy to, and I think he will, to what the back end algorithms are in terms of how they're suppressing people's voices and sort of how they're what they're using within that algorithm to identify those people. And I think that that's something that if he called out publicly on his own Twitter page, he could make things very uncomfortable for the company, while still inversely affecting the stock price in a positive way, because Elon's sort of like a meme stock in himself. If we started a company right now, right this second, could come up with any name in the world, like Woodblocks.
IDG
okay?
coin.
Yeah. We'll say Woodblocks, okay? And we don't even have a product, but we start this company. And tomorrow it hits the news that we partnered with an SPAC and we're going to go public with this, and that Elon has taken a 30% ownership stake. It would go from a $9.99 SPAC to being worth like $50 or $60 without people having any clue what the hell it is you make. Because anything he puts his name on, people buy the stock, period.
Interesting.
And so even in the Twitter aspect, if he was bashing them, he would probably still make the stock go up at the same
Oh,
time,
yeah.
because people would think, okay, something good's going to happen here.
Right.
So I do think he's going to have a positive effect. I would make a prediction that the first thing that'll happen is an edit button. I think that he's going to make an edit button at Twitter happen. But, beyond that, I think the suppression of free speech side is the most important thing in the long term. Is he going to be able to pull them back towards,
I'm almost nervous about an edit button.
Is
though,
there
because
not
this
one?
No, there's not an
So
edit
you can
button.
like on Instagram, you can edit a comment,
Yeah,
or like
you
YouTube,
can
you can edit a comment.
caption on Instagram. You can't on Twitter, but I'm a bit nervous about an edit button on Twitter because all of the so-called journalists will be able to edit things and
that they say.
But you
Yeah.
keep the original tweet.
Here's what my idea has always been for Twitter: make it editable for like 30 seconds. First 30 seconds. That's when people usually notice typos.
because it's like a grammar.
Yeah. And so, make it for 30 seconds, or have a 1-character edit thing. So if something, or a 2-character edit thing. So if you can change just 2 letters
see
in
what
your
you
tweet,
mean.
or something like that. Because the reality is, one of the arguments was, well, what if people retweeted and the person changes the whole tweet to say like, I hate blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Well,
That's
let's
another
just not make
concern.
that possible. That's not too difficult, to imagine. But it's the same concept as if you went on my Instagram right now and you shared something that I have posted, and then I changed the, what I wrote in it. And somebody
Caption.
goes from your story to my Instagram post, they're going to see what I wrote in the thing. And it could be something that says, surprise, Gina hates white people, or something like that. That would do the same essential thing
Right.
that we're worried about with Twitter. So, I think that it could be misused, but if you add certain parameters to it, it could be a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Second Amendment. Do you support 18-year-olds being able to conceal carry?
Yeah, you're an adult. You could go to war and kill people. You could go to war and die for our country or get shot in the head. Why would we limit your ability to have the same rights here as any other adult?
I know Tennessee is working on a bill right now, the Tennessee House, to allow 18-year-olds to carry.
Oh,
and
really?
there are people that are kind of lobbying that.
There's
they can't do anything on a federal level because there's no
Yeah.
federal conceal carry.
Yeah.
Here's the thing is, how many 18-year-olds are actually going to conceal carry? You know,
Well, you wouldn't know anyway.
Usually it's going to usually be ones who were raised in a positive gun culture where they've been
Correct.
exposed to the dangers. Like in the case of my 13-year-old, she knows all about guns. She knows more about a gun than your average adult does. She's been primed since birth on safety around guns, that they're a tool, but they're a dangerous tool that can do enormous damage. So you have to be really responsible with them. But they're a tool that I want my daughters to have. I want them to carry when they're 18. I want them to be able to carry when they go on a date with a guy.
Yeah.
I want them to have that great equalizer on them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the funny thing. I actually had this conversation with a self-described feminist, like probably like a month ago, where she had told me, I don't agree with you on guns. I don't agree with you on this. I don't agree with you on that. But you won my vote because you talk about the, trans issues and them taking away women's spaces and all that stuff. And I said, well, I appreciate your vote, but I have to ask you about the gun thing. You called yourself a feminist. How do you figure that being, opposed to the Second Amendment is a feminist position? And she said, well, people kill women with guns. I was like, well, they could kill you with anything. But beyond that, what is it that you would suggest to me as a father? I have 2 daughters. When they turn 18, what would you suggest I have my daughters do to be able to protect themselves if they go on a date with a guy who's 6'4" and potentially violent and they didn't know that, and they decide to try to impose their will on one of my daughters? What do you suggest they use to protect themselves? And she was totally stumped. And she's like, the pepper spray. I was like, pepper spray is not going to stop a guy like that. Like,
No.
I'm way bigger than you. Like, if I was determined to hurt you, I could.
Mm-hmm.
And how are you going to stop that from happening?
Yeah. No.
And I was like, a gun in my daughter's purse or a gun on her that she's carrying is going to protect her. That is going to be her great equalizer in that situation if a guy tries to hurt her in any way.
Yeah.
And I want them to have that because I care about, not just women, but I care about everybody having that ability to protect themselves, but in that context with the feminist, it was beautiful to be able to end it with gun rights or women's rights.
I mean, you would think like a radical feminist, like any image of them would be, them standing their ground with a gun in their hand, right?
Yeah,
like that would be
yeah.
the ultimate feminist imagery.
Yeah.
That's something, maybe we'll flip some of these people in this election,
Hopefully.
If you get in, is there any way to form like a congressional committee that would look into or investigate the appointment of Supreme Court justices who went lenient on child rapists and child pornographers? Is there any way to do that, or once they're in, they're in?
Once they're in, they're in. They've got to do something. You can impeach a justice, but once they're in, it's incredibly high bar to get them out. It's sort of, this really actually should be a lesson for people. Should be a lesson about the importance of elections. They do have consequences, and sometimes the consequence is somebody who is qualified to be a pedophile public defender becoming a Supreme Court justice. Okay, the lady, what she did in those cases is absolutely vile, and the fact she's going to sit on our highest court until the day she dies or retires is really a sad indictment of our country.
Yeah.
And where we're at right now. And it also speaks to the weakness of the Democrat Party in terms of them becoming resigned to allowing pedophilia to become normalized. Like they've essentially normalized it. And that's something they're not going to ever be able to run away from. Mm-hmm. But I hope they do try to turn back at some point. Like that's my hope. Like, listen, I don't want a country that thinks uniformly like me. Okay. I'm okay with there being opposition. I'm not okay with that opposition being a pro-pedophile party.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
And that's the thing, is that's where they're turning to lately, is becoming more and more supportive and sort of in tune with this idea of normalizing pedophilia. You see it on the academic level too, where they're having these teachers normalize it. There was one at I don't want to get the school wrong because it'd be a horrible thing to get wrong, but the major university, we'll put it that way. You probably remember this story where the professor went and did a podcast where he was advocating for lowering the age of consent to childhood, to like elementary age, and saying that essentially there was nothing wrong with adults and kids having sex with each other. And this is a professor at a major school.
Was that an NPR interview?
I don't remember what the podcast was.
I don't know if it was like a regular,
this was recent. This was like within the last 6 months.
Imagine, it doesn't make any sense to me. Imagine Joe Biden saying, I need to appoint a woman to the Supreme Court. And then they say, what's a woman? She says, I don't know.
Oh yeah, I can't.
You're
going to
need to clip that out for Instagram right there.
Yeah,
that was a
that's
good one right there.
No, it just doesn't make any sense.
I might steal that for a future
Go ahead.
video.
You could put it in a text post for Instagram or whatever.
I'm going to quote myself for that.
That's fine.
I'm going to take this, I'm going to do it on another show, and then I'm going to quote myself saying exactly what you just said.
We'll pull it out and put it on Instagram before that. So,
well, no, you know what you could add to the text graphic and put actually also said by me.
Oh, like the Michael
previous.
Scott,
Yes.
like you miss 100 shots, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky, Michael Scott.
Yes, exactly.
Our last office clip didn't work, but yeah.
I thought it was funny. When you win this seat, this may be a dumb question, but do you have to move to DC or can you just travel back and forth?
So, we're lucky that we're not a difficult journey from DC.
Yeah, it's just like a 2-hour nonstop.
He won't be
even
able
2
to afford an
hours.
apartment over there because like they don't get paid enough. Like AOC,
That's what AOC
is,
says, right?
Prime example
You're
of
going
that.
to be working class.
Yes.
Whenever you get
Imagine
that
making
seat, just
180 grand a year.
I know. So, it's about an hour and 20-minute flight.
Oh, wow.
It's
Really
short. It's fast.
Take the train.
You know me. You've been around my family and stuff. I love being a dad, and so there's no way I could go live in DC 5 days a week and then only see them on weekends or something. So I'm gonna do that flight every morning, and come back home by dinner time.
You're gonna fly every day?
Yeah.
That's incredible. Wow, that's a lot of flying.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be other congressmen who do that.
This is supposed to be a service, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the whole idea. That's why I don't want to do it for a long time,
right?
Because I don't want to do that for the rest of my life, doing that flight every day. But these are also formative years in my kids' lives. And that was probably the number one consideration of do I want to run or not. But my kids are so fully behind me running that was the thing that, was like, okay, yeah, I am supposed to do this. And they can come with me, during summertime and stuff like that if we're in session. And that's the thing is you go in and out of session. So you're not in DC all year long, So when you're in session, then, there's a busy period of time where, yes, you'll probably have to fly there, 4 or 5 days a week and then come home. And then you go back the next week. But then when you're out of session, you can be home in your district the whole time. So, and go back. I mean, a lot of them like living in DC. I don't understand that. I think there's something wrong with them. But, and I'll tell them all that. I've told a few of them that who live there. Like, I don't understand what's wrong with you.
Why?
Who wants to live here? I love farm life. We just got chickens and stuff. So I got to see those little chickadees grow up too. And so, I definitely won't be one of those ones that becomes a little swamp rat.
Yeah. Well, questions about people over there. Are there any? Because I know that I'm not going to name who they are, but there are some perceived conservatives who, they're on the younger side, but they seem like they parrot like a lot of cool, hip Fox News kind of like turning point, talking point kind of things where like, an 18-year-old be like, whoa, based. And then obviously you set yourself apart from rhinos and stuff like that, but are there any issues that you've talked about or any ideas that you've had that would really separate you from, obviously rhinos, but even conservatives that they wouldn't necessarily agree with you with?
That's a good question. Insulin, insulin prices. I think that we do have a duty, this is one of the things that I'm a populist more than anything else. I'm a populist conservative. And so when I meet a mom in a rural area and she's in tears because she doesn't know how she's going to pay for food or pay her rent because her kid's insulin is $2,000 and she doesn't make $2,000, but she has to find a way to get that money for his insulin. And I know the reality of what that pharmaceutical company is doing. I know that their price to make the insulin is just incredibly cheap. And I know the corruption behind all of this. I can't just sit there and be party to the corruption or ignore it and pretend it's not there. And so I do think on things like this, like, I do want a cap on insulin and the price of it. Either that or make it fully generic and open it up and allow everybody to produce it. Another one of the things I've said is that, we could institute a law that essentially says that it's a favored nation clause for pharmaceutical companies. The reality is that the vast majority of innovation in pharmaceuticals happens here in the United States, and it happens largely with grant money from the U.S. government that is funded with your tax dollars. And so why is it that we are charged more for those medicines that are developed here in America than Canada or Europe is? Mm-hmm. There's no reason for it except for they can get away with it. Yeah. And so if we then institute a favored nation clause that essentially says any pharmaceutical company that is selling to both us, Canada, and Europe has to charge us at least what they're charging them.
Right.
okay? Or I mean, at most, what they're charging them. I think that will also change a lot of things for your average family.
Are there Republicans who are opposed to that?
There's a lot that would be. There's a lot who take the big pharma money who would be. The Romneys, the Cheneys, Kinzinger. I mean, I can actually imagine a good, decent chunk who would oppose it because they're taking that money from those companies. So that's one area that sort of separates from those people a lot. In terms of immigration, there's a lot of squishy Republicans who believe in allowing, essentially amnesty for we're talking about a group of over 20 million at this point, illegal immigrants. I'm not getting on board with amnesty. They broke the law. They came here illegally. We can't just pretend that didn't happen.
Right. Ooh, should I ask the Blue Bayou question?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's this movie Blue Bayou about an individual who was adopted at a very young age. I believe he was 3 from Korea. And he, had somewhat of a checkered past as far as a criminal past. But on one of these incidences where he was arrested, the end result was he was going to be deported. And he was saying, well, how can I be deported? I was adopted here. I've lived here for over 30 years. Why am I being deported? And they said, well, your custodial, parents, the people who adopted you, the people who fostered you, they never finished the paperwork to make you a citizen. So technically you're still not a citizen. So I believe there's...
Well, that seems like a very rare situation where I'd say common sense should dictate the result. And it's...
Right.
They were for all intents and purposes, an American citizen.
Right. So there were a number of instances like this and cases like this. And I think there's legislation now that I saw. The sponsor of the bill was, I think, a Republican from Montana, I think. But then you see the co-sponsors, and it's Dianne Feinstein and a bunch of other people who, you don't normally feel positively about.
Yeah.
But it seems like what you said, like common sense. If someone's been here for 30 years, they were adopted, and it wasn't their fault that the adoptive
their
parents or whoever
forgot to do the paperwork, or something. Yeah. And in which case, honestly, the government is so terrible that I don't even believe the parents didn't do the paperwork. To tell you the truth, I believe the parents did do the paperwork, and the government lost it in the bureaucracy of DC. Yeah. Well, this is another thing, actually. This separates from the entire establishment. I believe we need to break up the bureaucracy entirely by moving them out of DC. And we also need Schedule F authority for the next Republican president to be able to fire everybody in the federal government. After we do that, we need to fire pretty much.
There are limitations of who you can't fire, right? Yes, I assume.
Yeah. And so this would change that. And so if you fire a large number of these people across the board, here's the thing people don't understand. If you hate what's going on in DC and in our government, you have to realize that all of these bureaucratic extensions of the government, they're essentially the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th branch of the government, okay? They're incestuous entirely, and they're almost entirely run by Democrats. And about 80% of the people who come into work every day at these bureaucratic places, they are Democrats, okay? Because DC is a heavily left-wing city, heavily. Mm-hmm. And so every single one of them are run by Democrats. What do you think the end result is going to be? Why do you think the IRS was weaponized against conservatives? And all these different places are weaponized against conservatives, the FBI, everything. Okay, it's because they're largely staffed by Democrats. They're not truly representative of a broad swath of our country. And so what do you think the effect would be of taking the FBI and sticking it in Wisconsin, taking Department of Treasury and sticking it in Florida, taking Department of Commerce and sticking it in Tennessee? What do you think would happen all of a sudden? All of a sudden, they would start to become a lot more common sense driven, and they would be largely, there'd be a lot of hiring parity when it comes to the political ideologies that are represented deep down. Because I know you're not supposed to take your politics to work, but what do you think Democrats do every day? They take their politics to work.
Right.
And so, if you break that up a little bit by making sure that there's going to be almost a sense of checks and balances by virtue of the fact that they're broken up. And here's the other thing it prevents them from protecting each other as easily as they do now. Because right now it's as easy as them saying, hey, James, want to go to dinner? Sure, Brad, let's go to dinner at blah, 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 whatever the Democrat donkey spot is they're eating at, okay? They go to that place, and then in that back room, they can make whatever deal they want to protect each other. Well, that's going to be a lot harder when Brad's in Wisconsin and John, or whatever his name was I made up, is in Florida, okay? It's going to be a lot more difficult to go ahead and do that. It's going to take a lot more coordination, which creates a lot more threads of the needle where they could be caught, doing whatever it is they're doing. And make no mistake, that corruption goes on. I mean, you know that. So, that's another thing that I think sort of is different than what, your average sort of person is going after here. Because I think we need to think outside the box again, too. Somebody asked me recently, they were like, what would you do if you had the authority to do anything to change the future of policing and how our country sees policing and everything? And I said, well, actually, it's something that probably seems pretty common sense, but I've never seen anybody go do as a politician. And it's let's make it mandatory in school and high schools. If you go to high school in America, that in high school and in middle school, you have immersion days with police where police come and they show you what exactly it is they get afraid of and what it is that makes them react by pulling their gun. What is it about those one-on-one encounters that are difficult to judge when to shoot and when not to shoot, and why it's so important? I mean, by proxy, you learn why it's so important to comply in situations where it can be really hairy for an officer. You know, it could be really scary for them. So if you think about this in real life terms, if you're in school right now, pretend you're in middle school or high school, you do one of these days and you get handed the gun, not a real gun, but you get handed a training gun. And essentially then the officer becomes the person who's the perp. And they carry out situations with you where they say, you have to decide whether to shoot me or not shoot me. Okay. And they do these. You're going to have a whole new appreciation for, number one, the job they have, the dangers they face, and the decisions they have to make in very, very quick periods of time. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but there's a news clip from Arizona. Have you seen it?
Yeah.
Where one of the primary protesters against police in Arizona agreed to go do a training day with them where they did exactly that. They gave him the gun and they carried out situations with him, and he had to choose when to shoot and when not to shoot. He errantly shot the majority of the times that he shot. And he learned a huge lesson that day. And he ended up giving an interview after saying it changed everything for me about how I feel about police. It is really hard to make that call, and it is really difficult to know when you're actually having your life put in danger. And I think that's something that would have incredible value in schools, because I think you'd suddenly, again, I'm all about changing culture. And I think you would change the fabric of the culture that there is right now, the dynamic, especially in big cities, with youth and police and sort of how they operate amongst each other as time goes on. It's also just going to naturally build relationships with police and the community and kids. And if any of these kids start to come up and have some problems, the police are more familiar with them and they know more about them and are able to appeal to emotion in ways that you're not able to with a stranger. And so I think all those things would be helpful. So I think just in general, thinking outside the box is a good thing, and we need to do more of it.
Do immersion day with parents in the classroom and see if the teachers teach the kids differently if they have parents in the classroom.
Yes. Teachers
so guys, guess what we did this week? So who read this weekend? They're not going to talk about their paddleboarding.
We're not going to.
I'm staring at you while my 6-year-old's over there. Like, go ahead.
Yeah.
I just
talk about it.
You know what really drives? I know this is off topic. It's back to previous topic, but what really bothers me about this whole teachers wanting to talk about their sex life and their private life thing is that why do they need validation from little kids?
I know.
Because it's loser. What
so
did I say?
It's
what was
loser
my
mentality? I don't know.
Loser mentality? What did I call it? It's because
it is so weird.
They're so narcissistic, and they really don't have a life outside, or maybe they don't have any validating friendships. They have no one to talk to. Right? There's no meaning, so they have to sort of.
Well, it's a specific brain worm that's going on here in their brains, because I know plenty of teachers who are great people. They're hard workers, and they do not want little kids to give them validation.
Yeah.
That's not what they're searching for.
Right, they're adults.
They get validation themselves and seeing how that kid grows up and develops.
Right.
And seeing, wow, the fruits of my teaching produced a really great member of society, a really great person, that they were great at that thing I taught them. That's where they derive, if they derive any at all from their students. They don't go and try to get instant validation from their kids that my sexuality is normal, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's okay.
Exactly.
It's cool. It's fine that I'm into that. It's cool that I have 3 husbands or 3 wives or whatever it is. That is weird.
Well, how probable
is
is it that if you have a mental illness and you happen to be a teacher, that you're going to bring that mental illness into the classroom?
Yeah. I mean, good point.
I'll say it. It's mental illness. I mean, how do you deal with endorsements? I mean, I've heard you say a couple buzzwords before. If you're populist and America first, do you have trouble taking endorsements from anyone who would fall under that category? I know that there are certain people running for Congress who have problems with that.
I'm not. Who had problems?
There's a congressman running. Where is he running? In Washington.
Washington.
Joe Kent.
What was his problem? What was Joe's problem?
He disavowed a endorsement from Nick Fuentes.
No, he just disavowed him entirely.
Oh, disavowed him entirely. Okay.
Well,
I see. Okay. So, all right, couple things. Number one, I'm lucky to have great endorsements. So I've been endorsed by Senator Rand Paul, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Madison Cawthorn, Candace Owens, Charlie Kirk. I mean, it's a long list. Actually, our sheriff right now for this county, for Williamson County, he endorsed me, Dusty Rhodes, which, by the way, is there a better name for a sheriff than Dusty Rhodes?
Dusty Rhodes?
Yes.
Wait, why is that name familiar?
He's our sheriff here.
No, but did he have a career in something else before becoming sheriff?
No, but it is the best name for a sheriff ever.
Dusty Rhodes.
Like, that's just, it sounds like something out of a show.
Dusty, not Dusky, right?
Dusty. Yeah, Dusty Rhodes.
Dusty.
Like, you don't want to mess with Dusty Rhodes,
rom-com.
But then
Just
on the flip side of that, somebody like, let's say, Nick, I think that anytime somebody is like just a kind of a loose cannon and they can explode at any time doing stuff, like there is a danger in aligning yourself with them in politics, and so I think he's done certain things too, and his group of followers have done things where they've attacked me for being Latino, where it's like, I couldn't choose I was Latino. This is the most ridiculous thing ever, where they're like, they take things to extremes sometimes that I feel like are not actually productive. They might be exciting to that group of people, but it's not productive. You're not going to get anything done off of it. Like if Fuentes thinks that he's ever going to be able to create some sort of coalition that can provide real change in our country, even on the issues he cares about, he's sorely mistaken. That's just not how the world operates. And it's not how, the vast majority of people, like, you need to be able to form coalitions in our country to be able to actually have real power to change things. And when you're locked into such a tight knit sort of group where there's no room for expanding beyond it, it doesn't provide for that ability to have a coalition that is cohesive, that can actually win.
What did they say about you being Latino?
It's just weird, like comment troll stuff, like, you're Latino, you should go back to Cuba, stuff like that, which is just stupid. Like, they're just trolls. They're like 18-year-old kids who are trolling. My feelings are not hurt by it. I don't think that they're like racist for saying that to me or anything like that. I just think they're stupid kids that are trolling on the internet, and they would do it because, I think Fuentes actually blocked me on Twitter before he was banned because I don't even remember what it was, but it was kind of weak. Like, be strong enough not to block people,
Interesting.
You can have a debate.
I don't know. I just see that side of the conservative sphere as only growing, just because I think, like, it's not so much like edgelord comedy or, whatever it is. I just see that sphere of knowing culture just growing more and more. But yeah, like you said, I guess it's not probably the best way to form coalitions. I get that. People are turned off to that.
A lot of those young people who may be attached to it now, like, this is not the end of their story.
Right.
And I think that's the thing I have a big problem with, is that, like, people who try to take an 18-year-old kid, maybe being a little bit stupid, who follows, Fuentes or whoever it is, and maybe making some mistakes. Like, that's not the end of their story. They could be incredible people, difference makers in politics, and they may do amazing things for our country. So don't throw them out over what they're doing now. And that's one of the things, I agreed with, I talked with Marjorie about her going, and she spoke at the thing, and her intention was totally to, like, bring some positivity into these young people's lives and show that, like, you're not alone, you're not forgotten, I see you, and give them a set of ideas that may lead them towards something that is going to lead towards positive coalition building. Yeah. Because if you look at the speech she gave that everybody was mad at her for, in it, she was talking about how we all need to unite, like, not around race, not around a racial identity, but around a set of ideas, and that those set of ideas are pro-American ideals.
Right.
And so the media was so dishonest about that whole deal,
of
which
course.
I think should tell people everything. But, that's sort of how I see it, is that, like, we've got to remember that there's a human being inside of people who make mistakes and stuff like that, and that they're capable of great things still, and that you can't just cancel them out forever, But yeah, in terms of the Fuentes guy, I don't have much respect for him, because I saw him as kind of weak, blocking somebody on Twitter because you were afraid to have a debate about something. I don't even remember what it was about, but it's like, I mean, how hard could I have been on the guy? Like, I'm not like one of those people who goes crazy, you know?
Yeah, you're pretty nice.
Yeah. It was something that had to do with, it was fact driven. I remember that. Like I was giving statistics on something and he didn't like it, you know?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, when you said America First, I assume that it wasn't like, you know, that sort of coalition that he started, but it was just as a general idea. Of America First. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Putting our country first.
Yes.
I think we got to wrap in a minute because I got to go.
Do we have any questions though?
Do
you want to hit with one or two from the internet?
Do
Questions from the internet?
Questions. Yeah.
Internet calls.
Okay. So a lot of these we've answered. What would be your ideal economic and industrial policy for the U.S.?
Ideal economic, industrial, and what else?
Economic and industrial policy.
Jeez, that's not an in-depth question.
Yeah. So, well, that one's going to take a long time to break down, but I'll keep it very simple here. Number one is that we need to divorce ourselves from China. And I think that that's something that is step one to anything we do is we have to build out the infrastructure here to divorce from China. And we have to we have to build in incentives for companies to ensure that they do divorce from China. And so part of that is strengthening America, but part of that is also the intention to weaken China, because China, if you don't try to weaken them now, you're not going to be able to later. And so I think we have to take a very aggressive posture when it comes to China, and that's the number one way we could do it. They said industrial too, correct?
Yeah.
So I mean, that kind of touches both segments of that because it's going to affect the industrial side of our country, but also the economics of both China and the U.S. And so I think that's step one. And obviously it's super multi-pronged in terms of how you do that. But I would say I'm on the most aggressive side of how you do it. And I think that China has done enough where we have to have some semblance of payback. And this is part of it, you know?
Okay, here's a good one. How to determine who is an honest America First candidate from the wannabes and liars?
That's a good question.
That's a good piggyback off of.
That's a good question. I feel like I semi-answered it a little bit earlier when I was talking about like what people need to ask themselves about candidates. Like, what are they really willing to risk? What have they done? And, you know, like in the case of this election, here's another thing. Okay, where were they when mask mandates were happening, when they were forcing masks on little kids? Where were they when they were firing people over not getting a vaccine? Where were they when they were shutting businesses down? If you don't know where they were, you should find out, because I was there at all these things. I was at the school board meetings. I was fighting for the parents. I was getting people lawyers. I was working with these people. I was leading rallies. You know, we were doing work. Now, other people in this race, I have no idea where the hell they were, you know, and I think that that's something that's a good predictor for people of where people's hearts are, is like, are they investing the time? Are they going to do these things that really don't have that high of a net return for them as an individual, but they're doing it because they care about it, or not? You know, were they in DC schmoozing, you know, whatever PAC's, you know, lead person who's going to make sure that they get funneled a bunch of money? You know, I think that that's what people should ask themselves, is where they're spending their time and who they're taking money from.
Yeah. Follow the money trail.
Uno más.
Here's a fun one. What is something in your personal life that you are extremely proud of?
My wife, you know, very, very broadly. I mean, I guess just in general, like the work she's doing fighting exploitation of kids and trafficking and everything. And she's doing it in a very different way. And she understands the cultural aspect of it and how that is essentially its own trafficking system in a very different new way. And that the way you deal with it is preventing it from ever happening. And that means changing the culture, you know? So I'm very proud of the stuff she's doing there. But then also my kids and how they've dealt with this campaign. Like they've been... It's hard on kids. Like, you know, they've had a dad their whole life who's been at every game, at everything, at everything they could ever want, you know? So it's been kind of idyllic in that sense most of their life. But then now dad always has to go to events and all that stuff. And they've been great with it. They've been so good with it. And they've come to a lot of the stuff and everything, but they don't complain too much about me being gone for things. And
I
stuff
told
like
you
that.
this before, and I said this to Mike before the show. Meeting your kids and spending time with them was like when I knew I was going to vote for you. Because you can tell so much. I really believe this. You can tell so much about a person by the way that their kids are, by the way that they raise their kids.
I agree with that. Yes.
And I saw all three of them. I was like, these are great kids. And we talked about on the last episode with Lana. They're well spoken. They're so engaging, and they have the true innocence of children.
Yeah.
And I think you guys have done such a good job with them. So you can give them their allowance now for
Okay.
you know,
They
earning you
get
a
their
vote.
allowance.
You know
I'll
what's
tell-
cool
I'll
too?
tell
If
him
you're a congressperson
approved.
and you get to sit on those committees, you know what I mean? You get your assistant like sitting behind you and like passing you notes and stuff like that. I've always wondered who those people were.
Who they are?
Oh,
yeah,
th-
like
those
the
are
people
just
on this.
their aides.
Yeah, they're aides. You get you get an aide.
Yeah,
Yeah.
an
But
aide.
you get multiple.
You get multiple aides.
You get a lot of aides, actually. Yeah.
Oh boy, a lot of aides. Oh, can we
The way he said it sounded bad.
Can we? They were talking about, we'll end on this, but the whole thing that Madison Cawthorn was saying about, the orgies and stuff happening in D.C. and how, he was exaggerating a bit. Lest we not forget that there was a congressperson. What was her name? Katie Hill. That was really having
Legit.
orgies with her aides.
With her aides, yeah. And
but he's exaggerating, right? Like,
she blocked me.
Is this something that anybody does not think is happening in Washington, D.C.? I mean, everybody knows why they're really mad at Madison, and it has nothing to do with this happening or not happening. It has to do with acknowledging it
yeah.
as a member of Congress.
That's how I know that it's true, that so many people are saying that he's wrong.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a sign.
You know what should happen, though? I think it's far past time for Congress to be transparent about how much money they've paid out to settle sexual harassment and sexual assault cases that have been privately hidden from the American people, and which members.
Why would it be private? Is it because they're paying from?
They're paying from
private...
the Congressional Slush Fund. No, they're paying from a Congressional Slush Fund.
You get FOIAs for that?
Nope.
No. Can you change that?
Yes, you can.
Okay, do it.
And that's something that I would like to see change. I think the American people deserve to know where that money went.
Absolutely.
I want to know.
And what members paid out. Because here's the thing. If the member's innocent, then why the heck was the person never paid? And they should have to pay that money back.
Right.
And
that's our money.
The member, because I can tell you this. If I was accused of something like that, I would never, ever, ever be okay with them paying that person off. Ever. I would mount the most vigorous, ferocious defense you've ever seen.
Right.
Where people would be in the very beginning, they'd probably be like, wow, he's going way too hard. I mean, it's kind of, I would go nuts over it. Okay. I would launch the most vigorous defense you've ever seen because that is what is required of innocence.
Yeah.
You have to be fiercely defendant of your character and who you are. And if their answer to that in DC is, well, just pay her off, it'll be easier, quieter. That's not a value. At all. At least not one that I want to be associated with. So I think that it's time to put that out in the open.
I agree.
I like that. Thanks for making the time to come on, Robby. Tell everybody where to find you.
Oh, at Robby Starbuck on every platform. You spell Robby with a Y, not an IE. If you spell it with an IE, you should probably be somewhere else, not in America. It's not an American thing to do. Okay. I'm joking, of course. I always get in trouble for that, for deporting people in comedy. But no, ROBBY Starbuck on every platform except for Facebook, where you have to put Robby Starbuck TN because Facebook is a difficult place with people who don't work with us very nicely. So we had to add a TN to the end. And outside of that, Starbuck2022.com. You can donate there. You can sign up to volunteer. Volunteering is critical. You can do it from anywhere in the country because it's a federal race. So you can phone call for us from your state, and you call people in our district and tell them why I'm the candidate they should vote for. And that's, to be frank with you, not a hard sell considering the people I'm running against.
Love it.
Nice.
Thank you, Robby. Thanks,
Robby.
everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.